meet one Walter Neff, insurance salesman extraordinaire, played by Fred McMurray. And I got to think, like, as a leading man, I think Fred McMurray is so perfectly cast in this because, like, he is, how should I put this? Not that great an actor as compared to William Holden, the lead in Sunset Boulevard, who is, just like a virtuoso.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's just nothing but character, swag. Like, he's just everything. Whereas Fred McMurray was mostly known as a star of kind of Disney family movies, like The Absent-Minded Professor. He was fucking around with Flubber, but then shows up as like two absolute shitheels in Billy Wilder movies in Double Indemnity, and then maybe even a worse guy in The Apartment.
Oh yeah.
But what I mean is, like, unlike Holden, who is such a presence, I think Fred McMurray works so beautifully in this movie because he is kind of a bland everyman, and he presents this kind of this perfect portrait of the kind of like sort of like adrift American male who's like, as the movie begins, he's selling insurance, and he's sort of like walking around in his head in the clouds in a state of kind of boredom and sexual fantasy, basically is how I describe it.
Yeah, and his narration is kind of like a pre-Holden Caulfield. Like, he's very not disillusioned, I would say, but like he kind of sees everything as like being bullshit. He's like, yeah, I do insurance, I'm good at it. Like, the only real truth I feel like that he sees is that his buddy Keys is a good guy deep down, and everything else is just like, time to go out again today and sell some more policies.
But it's also like the salesman is almost like an interesting figure in noir, because it's just like in the era of the door-to-door salesman, it was just these sort of like men loosed upon to the world in the daytime when husbands are away to basically beguile, threaten, or seduce housewives. And it's like it's a job that brings you into people's homes, and like, and crossing that threshold, he begins to like, envelop himself in this world of sexual fantasy. As he is, the first thing we see of Barbara Stanwyck, the great femme fatale who plays Ms. Dietrichson in this movie, is she's in a towel, and we see like her as she comes down the stairs, we see some feeties, and he notices the anklet. He keeps talking about the anklet. He's an ankle and foot guy.
Oh yeah.
But I should say, like, the movie actually begins with like it's a late night. He's staggering into the office. Like, we know as the movie progresses that he's dying, and he goes into his office to record the voiceover narration that we hear on this really cool like
wax cylinder
thing. That's actually how we're recording this podcast.
Yeah.
I'm speaking into a gramophone, and then Chris is running. He's actually cranking by hand.
They used to be called wax casts back in those days.
And he's addressing his voiceover to his friend Keys, who we'll get into. I will just say that Keys, played by Edward G. Robinson, is probably, once again, like one of my favorite movie characters of all time, maybe one of my favorite performances of all time. Edward G. Robinson is just so compelling and perfect in this role as Keys, the insurance claims investigator who is beguiled by his little man, i.e. the ulcer he has from smoking 10 cigars an hour. And again, like what I like about the beginning is that like it's a story about murder, but like from the first frames of the movie, there is absolutely no mystery as to who is guilty. Like, he just says like, yeah, like I was the one who killed Dietrichson. And there's not only is there not any mystery about who done it, there's also like there's no mystery about his motive for doing it either. And in fact, actually, the real mystery of the movie is, does he even know his own motives?
Yeah,
because he says to Keys like, "Oh, I did it for a woman
and the money, and in the end, I didn't get the woman, and I didn't get the money." Yeah,
but like what I think is so interesting about this movie is like kind of a psychological portrait. Is that I think the money and the girl are both excuses that are legible to him, but I don't think they're really the true motivation for why he does anything.
No, and it's the same in Sunset Boulevard too. It's like their motivations, these two guys, are like so opaque, and like only God knows why they're doing what they're doing. It's just like truly because they're just on the tracks going straight down the line, truly.
And that's what I mean about like the very grim fatalism of both these movies, is that like there's really nothing, like even before like there's really nothing that either of these guys can do that could alter the tragic course because they were on the trolley car before they even knew they were on one. That's called being born. So like, then it flashes back to him approaching the Dietrichson house, which, by the way, still exists in Los Feliz. He mentions in the movie that it only costs $30,000, which is meant to be like
For
a
the
huge
full
sum of
episode,
money.
subscribe
But
at
yeah, wow, if you could have that house in Los Feliz for 30 grand
patreon.com/ChapoTrapHouse.
today. Holy shit.
There's so many little things like that in this
Yeah.
movie where it's like, oh yeah, it was the 40s were wild.
Yeah, oh god. Oh, I love all the details. Like one of the first things, the first dialogue between is Neff and like the elevator monkey that they get to like take him up 2 floors, and he's just like, working late, Mr. Neff, and he's like bleeding to death, and he's
It's
like,
like,
oh god. That's another great thing about this movie is the horror of having to make
For the
small
full
talk with
episode,
people. It's
subscribe
just
at
for unbearable tension in a number of these
patreon.com/ChapoTrapHouse.
scenes.
It's like Barbara Stanwyck says at one point, when Walter Neff tells her like, yeah, I just get my stuff at the deli down the street, and she's like, oh, that sounds great. It's all strangers, so you don't have to hate them because you don't know them.
And then so like he's there to follow up on an auto insurance claim to get the claim holder, Mr. Dietrich.
For the full episode, subscribe at patreon.com/ChapoTrapHouse.